Well, unless you've been living under a rock, man, 2020 has been a crazy year so far. This is the longest year that I've ever lived. It's just a crazy, crazy year. And, we've forgotten a lot of things that have happened. Unless you went online and read an article about all the crazy things that have happened. That's what I did as I was preparing this message. And I thought, let's take a look at some of the major events that have happened in the past 5 months. It's only been 5 months. We're in the month of June now. And if you remember, 2020 began with the brush fires in Australia, threatening the lives and property of many Australians there. And we've quickly forgotten about that. Also, the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani, he was killed in U.S. drone strikes. Remember that? And as a result, there's some conspiracy theory going on, but some say as a result, there was a Ukrainian plane that was shot down, killing 178 passengers and crew members, including many Canadians. That happened in 2020, just a few months ago. Very tragic. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped down from the royal family to move to Canada. That's not so tragic. It's just, kind of a fun little tidbit if you're into the royal family. There was the impeachment trial and the acquittal of Donald Trump, President of the United States. Remember that? That happened not too long ago, a few months ago. Of course, NBA legend Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and 7 others died from a helicopter crash the end of January. That one hit me hard, as it had hit some of you hard as well. The United Kingdom left the European Union this year. That kind of got subsided under some of the other more prominent news items. Harvey Weinstein was found guilty of rape and criminal sexual acts, right? That wasn't a tragedy, actually, that was justice, so that was a bit more of an upside there. March 11th was when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 officially a pandemic. We are entering month 4 now, 3 months into it, in just 4 days. Who declared COVID-19 officially a pandemic? And then sometime later, maybe a week or 2 later, I forget the exact timeline, who let the dogs out? Remember that? Said that dogs are not contagious with this virus. In April, there was a mass shooting in Nova Scotia. Remember that? Claimed the lives of 22 victims. That was horrible. A shooting of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. That happened not too long ago. And of course, this pandemic, COVID-19, has been prevalent all over the globe, resulting in massive lockdowns. And still here in North America, at least, is a majority of society that is still locked down, especially in Canada, especially here in Toronto, where a majority of the cases in Canada are here in Ontario and Quebec. Remember when there was no toilet paper at the beginning of this? Now it's easy to buy. And the latest to hit the news on a large scale is the killing of George Floyd by the hands of Minneapolis police officer. And this resulted in a lot of protesting and rioting in major cities across the U.S. and protests even here in Canada. Just reminding us of the police brutality and racial injustices that happen here, at least here in North America and other parts of the world. Police brutality is not a new thing. It's, unfortunately. I want to read some names of those in the black community who have suffered. Begin with Rodney King. Now, I remember 1992, the LA riots. I was living in LA, about 20 minutes from downtown. I remember watching on the news. We were living in a neighborhood, it was more of a suburb, and so And so thankfully, our family was a little bit isolated from all the rioting going on, but it wasn't too far from us. I remember watching the news and watching the mass chaos that was happening because of the acquittal of the police officers who beat Rodney King. Malice Green is another name. Abner Louima, Amadou Diallo, Eric Gardner, John Crawford III, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Philando Castile, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and recently here in Toronto, the death of Regis Korchinski-Paquette, who was thrown off a balcony or jumped off a balcony. They're still investigating. And I think the death of George Floyd was in many ways the straw that broke the camel's back. It's the perfect storm of everything that's going on that is causing these protests and riots. We as a people are just sick and tired. We're sick and tired of what's going on in this world. We're tired. We're tired of the lockdowns. We're tired of injustices that are happening. And I think it points to the fact that we as humans have this innate sense of justice and rightness or righteousness, pointing to the fact that there is a God with these standards, and these standards have been brought down to us. Most of us, if not all of us, will agree that this excessive force and that leads to murder, for what? For using a counterfeit $20 bill? Or going into a construction site? We know deep down that is not justified. Most of us agree that racism is wrong. I mean, most organizations that I know in the past week or so have posted a statement saying such, of how they are appalled at any form of racism, and they stand for equality of all people. But it's not simply that racism is wrong. It's not simply that racial injustice is wrong. What is the basis for that? We all know racism is wrong, but what is the basis? Why is racism wrong? And that's what I want to talk about. Why is racism a sin? Simple answer is because God said so. Yeah. Right? Sometimes we might tell our children that if they keep saying, why? Well, because God said so. End of story. Period. Full stop. But I like to ask why. Why is it wrong? And I think we can learn why racism is wrong from the beginning of time, from the beginning of the scriptures. Genesis 1, in the beginning, God establishes creation. He creates the universe, and he establishes certain truths. And so we go to Genesis 1 to see why racism and racial injustice is wrong. Really, it is the basis for biblical anthropology, an idea of humanity. So let's read Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 27. The scripture says, God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." Verse 27. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Reading from the NIV. In this passage, we're going to look at three implications of the Imago Dei for today. Three implications of the Imago Dei. Imago Dei is the Latin phrase for the image of God. The image of God, Imago Dei. The fact that we are bearers of God's image. And so 3 implications of the Imago Dei. I think this is going to be a long one, so hang tight. Okay? I ask for your patience. The first implication is this: as the Imago Dei, we reflect God. As the Imago Dei, we reflect God. Now, it begins in verse 26. God says, "Let us make mankind or humanity in our image, in our likeness." There's a lot of debate on what this means. Image. What does image of God means? Because when in English, the word image refers to a visual picture, a visual reflection of something else, of the source. That's what it means in English. And in Hebrew, it is used in that way as well. Hebrew is the original language in Genesis. But it also refers to resemblance in general. What resembles the source. And so when it says, "Let us make humanity in our image," and then it says, "in our likeness," that is a further description of what image is. Likeness is another word. This is what we call in Hebrew literature hendiadys, which are 2 words that refer to the same thing, blank and blank, and refer to the same thing. So image, in our likeness, it's a hendiadys, referring to the same thing. And it helps communicate what image means. The image of God is the likeness of God. Not that we are exactly the same as God, but there is a likeness to God that we bear. And the Imago Dei, the image of God, the Imago Dei is what separates humans from every other creature on this world, on this planet. Every other creature. We bear a resemblance to God. Okay? Again, I want to clarify. Not that we are gods, not that we are little gods, as some religions posit, but that we have some resemblance of God. And we'll get there in just a second. Now, Adam was the first human. We know that. Well, there's some debate about that, actually, some scholarly debate. We won't get into there, or else this is going to be like a 2-hour message. Adam was the first human. He fell, introduced sin, and the Imago Dei, because of sin, was marred. In the sense, it was shattered. It's like a mirror with cracks in it because of sin. And then Jesus came, who is often called the second Adam. He came and undid what Adam did, and undid what humanity did. And Jesus represents the perfect Imago Dei, the perfect image of God, the visual representation of God. But, nevertheless, we as fallen humans, we still have the Imago Dei. We still bear the Imago Dei. Every human being, even psychopaths, to a degree, resemble and bear the Imago Dei. And there's a lot of scholarly discussion on the meaning of the Imago Dei. In one book I looked at, there were about probably 10 different views of what the Imago Dei refers to. And we're not going to get into the details of that. But the essential meaning of it is that we are created in His resemblance in a way that other creatures do not resemble God. And it relates to the inner being, the soul, the spirit of a person. The reformer John Calvin says that the image of God, the Imago Dei, is not reflected outwardly, but in the inner person, in the soul of a person. He says in his magnus opus, The Institutes of the Christian Religion, he says this, quote, "For although God's glory shines forth in the outer man, yet there is no doubt that the proper seat of His image is in the soul." Read that again. "For although God's glory shines forth in the outer man, yet there's no doubt that the proper seat of His image is in the soul." And the ways that we resemble God are 4 ways: morally, spiritually, mentally, and relationally. We represent God. Morally, we represent God. You know, if you ask any person on this planet, most likely, they'll say that torturing babies is wrong. There are some universals. There's a universal morality that exists in humanity. One of them, as we have seen, is racial injustice. Although not every society believes in that, we know from history that there are some societies who are racially supremacist. But there is a general idea within humanity that racial injustice is wrong. There's a general idea of the fact that love is a virtue, charity is a virtue. It separates us from animals and everything else in creation. They don't have morals. Now, I saw a video of a praying mantis eating a murder hornet. This was when that news of murder hornets, we've forgotten about that, haven't we? Murder hornets. And, I'm kind of weird. Actually, someone told me about this video, so you should check it out. And it was a bit disturbing, okay? But it's a 2-minute video that shows a praying mantis eating alive a murder hornet, just destroying it. And I was just like, it's like one of those things where you just kind of do this. You're like, I don't want to see, but I kind of want to see. And I highly doubt, if I were a betting man, I would bet on this, that the praying mantis was feeling bad a little bit, like the mantis had some kind of conscience and was like, man, I probably should, poor murder hornet as he's, destroying it. I don't think so. It's just nature. And the praying mantis was just doing what it is supposed to do as a part of nature. There was no moral compass that animals have. We also resemble God spiritually. Right? The fact that in every human soul there's a longing for something greater. Longing for something greater. The rock star Bob Dylan, most of you guys have heard of. He wrote a song, "You got to serve somebody." It may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you got to serve somebody. All of us serve something, whatever it might be, because there is something greater in our souls, in each and every person's soul, that we long for. It could be anything. But that's a spiritual quality, the fact that we all long for something greater, something higher. And oftentimes, people will speak of a higher power, a greater power, or a greater being that exists in this world. That's spiritual. And we know ultimately that's Jesus Christ. We resemble God mentally. Humans, we have come a long way, haven't we? If you look at technology, if you look at what the human mind is able to create, not just even technology, but art. Just the beautiful art that humans create out of their own minds. I'm a musical person, and certain songs, it just blows my mind of how human minds, or one mind, could create something so beautiful. You don't have animals composing songs or poetry. You don't have animals erecting architecture. They have their own little forms of what they can do. I'm not saying animals are not smart, but they aren't at the level that humans are. The human mind being able to speak and use language in order to communicate. We are the only species on this earth that is able to use language. and some people multiple languages. And then relationally, we've seen this throughout the COVID lockdowns, haven't we? We are relational, and God is relational. We resemble God because God is a triune God, and within the Godhead, God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, enjoyed a perfect relationship with each other in the beginning of time and continues to enjoy a relationship within the Godhead. And we are created to be relational as well. And so these are the ways in which we bear the Imago Dei. And so the implication is that if every person bears the Imago Dei, even if we're fallen, every person reflects God. Regardless of who you are, regardless of your background, regardless of your ethnicity, regardless of your race, regardless of your gender, regardless of your socioeconomic status, regardless of your IQ or EQ or GQ, whatever it is, regardless of any of that, we all represent the Imago Dei. And so that's why in the parable of the lost sheep, right, Luke 15, he leaves the 99 to look for the one. Leaves the 99 to look for the one, because that one is valuable. You guys have heard the saying, Black Lives Matter. Hashtag sometimes. And, of course, there is the counter saying, all lives matter. And I saw someone post this, said, saying all lives matter in the context of Black Lives Matter is like when someone's parent dies, and you go up to them and say, well, every parent dies. Imagine saying that at a funeral. How insensitive. Well, in the U.S. at least, there is a conundrum. And it's the same principle that amongst 100 sheep, when he leaves the 99 to look for the one, it's that one life that matters because the 99 are not in danger. The one is the one that has gone away and is lost and is possibly in danger. That one life matters because all of us are created in the image of God. We bear the Imago Dei. The Canadian Council of Churches recently, within the past year, posted a statement well before this period that we're living in right now. It said, "There can be no peace without justice. God's peace cannot be separated from God's righteousness, justice, and steadfast love. Peacemaking and the establishment of conditions for just relationships are indispensable to our common faith. Working for peace is about establishing justice among persons and societies and in all areas of our public life." And then it goes on, it says, creating a just peace involves freeing human beings from fear and want, overcoming enmity, discrimination, and oppression. It requires establishing conditions for just relationships that respect the experience of the most vulnerable and value the integrity of creation. Let me read that last sentence again. It requires establishing conditions for just relationships that respect the experience of the most vulnerable and value the integrity of creation. And the basis of this, the basis of why we value the integrity of creation, particularly humanity, is that we are all bearers of the Imago Dei. We're created in God's likeness. There is a resemblance of God that each and every person has. No matter what. No matter what. So that's the first point. The first implication of the Imago Dei is that as the Imago Dei, we resemble God. We reflect God. Number two, as the Imago Dei, We have purpose and value. As the Imago Dei, we have purpose and value. So back to verse 26. It says, let us create, or let us make humanity in our image and our likeness. And then it says, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all wild animals. One of our purposes on this earth, one of the purposes that we as humans have on this earth is to take care of it, to rule over it. We are responsible for the earth to continue. And it's interesting, one of the realizations, this is a kind of a side point, but I think it's a point worth bringing into. So side point. But one of the realizations during this pandemic and the lockdowns is that we've realized that we've been destroying our planet. In some ways, the spread of COVID-19 and the mandatory shutdowns have allowed the planet to heal itself for this time being. All the damage that's been done to it, especially within the past 50, 70 years or so, especially during the Industrial Revolution. I mean, the Industrial Revolution has gone on for much longer than that. We've had reduced CO2 emissions in the air, so the air out there is fresher, it's cleaner. Have you noticed that if you've been outside? It seems fresher and cleaner. There's footage from the skies where you can actually see the city, especially in congested places, perhaps like Toronto or Los Angeles, New York. The air is just clear, the visual is better. The bodies of water have been cleaner as a result of people staying home. And it's kind of just pointed out to us that we as a people, collectively, we as a people have been destroying our planet. We have not done what we're supposed to do in terms of ruling over this world and taking care of it. But again, that's beside the main point here, a point still worth mentioning. The point is that it's our duty to rule over this world, to take care of this world. And guess what? That is a heavy burden, to take care of a planet as a collective whole. We're to do our diligence in taking care of this planet. And this is something that I haven't really been strong on in my own life. And Canada is one of the countries that are actually pretty good at doing this. Heavy emphasis on recycling. I didn't even know what recycling was until I got here. I mean, I knew what it was, but you just throw everything away. I mean, that's what I did. And I made an effort. Okay, well, the society here, there's very little littering going on in the cities. And we make an effort. It takes a little bit of effort. Sometimes it stresses me out when they have like 3 or 4 boxes or cans, and I'm like, I have this cup, which one does it go into? And it stresses me out. But it's our duty. And it's a high calling, actually, if we think about it. It's a high calling to take care of this earth. God created this universe, and He gave the earth to us to take care of. And He said, hey, you guys take care of all the animals and the livestock and everything that exists in this world. And that gives us value and worth. God would not just give that responsibility to creatures that weren't able and are incapable of fulfilling it. The value of life is also stated just a few chapters down, Genesis 9:6. Genesis 9:6 says, whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed, for in the image of God, God has made mankind, or humanity. This is in the context of Noah and the flood. God saw the wickedness of humanity upon this earth and created a flood and spared Noah and his family. And after He destroyed what He had created, He says, Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall the blood be shed, for in the image of God, God has made humanity. Which shows that the Imago Dei is the basis for the value of life. Because it's not just that it's a bad thing to do, but if someone created in the image of God is killed by another person, you are destroying the image of God. That is why. Now, I'm not being political here. I'm not trying to be political. It's not about conservative versus liberal. It's not about anything of that sort. I am not trying to get into political issues here, but what we're talking about is murder. We're talking about the value of life and murder, simply put. And especially about death that is not deserving. And as bearers of the Imago Dei, each and every person has life, purpose, and value, regardless of any category. Regardless of any category. Now we know what's going on. George Floyd has been hitting the news a lot, especially because of riots. But let me tell you a couple stories maybe you haven't heard of. In February of 1999, there was a young man, about 23 years old, wasn't too much older than I was. His name was Amadou Diallo, living in New York City. He's originally from Guinea, the continent of Africa, came to the U.S. to pursue that American dream. He had this dream. He went to school. He was working part-time. And one night in February of 1999, he was coming home from a late-night meal, a little past midnight, and he was shot 41 times by police officers. He was not armed. He was in front of his apartment building. He was shot 41 times. Another story, you may have heard of the comedian Dave Chappelle. He's a well-known comedian right now, and he tells this story. He was at a comedy club one day, and he was just kind of relaxing, and someone asked him, hey, you're Dave Chappelle, can you do a little sketch for us? And he agreed to do so, and he had a person yell out, "All lives matter, not just black lives." And so he tells this story. He says he was driving down, he's from Ohio, he's driving in Ohio, and it was kind of a rural area, and he kind of rolled through a stop sign. And so a cop pulls him over, and so he's a little nervous, and he says, he's thinking to himself, I'm Dave Chappelle, but I'm still black. Can't take any chances. He has his hand on the steering wheel, cop comes up, and asks, and Dave Chappelle says, "My license and registration are in my glove compartment. Can I go get it?" And the cop says, "I know who you are. You're Dave Chappelle." And he says, "I don't need your. Hey, listen, guy, just slow down, okay?" Got off on a warning. Fast forward at some time, there was a man named John Crawford III in Ohio. He was in a Walmart. He was holding a BB gun, and people called 911. It was a real-looking gun, apparently, and some people in the store got scared, called 911, and 2 police officers show up, and one of them opened fire, and he ended up dying. The twist is, the cop that opened fire on John Crawford was the same cop that pulled Dave Chappelle over. And the lesson that Dave Chappelle says is you shouldn't have to be a Dave Chappelle in order not to be murdered, not to get shot at. I have another short story, the one that actually rings home for us here in Canada. There's a 23-year-old woman named Chantel Moore. Originally from BC, was living in New Brunswick. And this happened not too long ago. She was indigenous. And someone called one of those wellness calls because she was not mentally well at the time. And apparently she was holding a knife and making threats. The police officers opened fire, and she was found dead because of that. And it's all over the news. You can look at it. You can look at the articles. And there was one line that I read. It says, "Who ends up dead from a wellness call?" Right? Maybe our situation here is a bit different than the U.S. Maybe in Canada we ought to promote a hashtag Indigenous Lives Matter as well. But every human life, regardless of our race, regardless of our ethnicity or background or culture or gender, socioeconomic status, our class, our heritage, or any other human category that we can think of, even sexual orientation, regardless of what your views are on that, even if you don't agree with that lifestyle, regardless of what category you belong to, we are all bearers of the Imago Dei, and we all have value in life. We all deserve dignity. We all deserve respect. And what sickens me is when Christians, in the name of God, treat somebody that has a different theology, that has a different worldview, with indignity, with disrespect. That is not Christ-like. We can disagree on stuff. We can disagree on our theology. And we can even be staunch on that. We can disagree. We all have independent minds. We don't all have to think the same way. But at least we must treat each other with respect and dignity. That is where Christians often fail. If you're not a Christian and you're listening to this, I just want to say that is not the Christian way. That is not the biblical way. That is not the Jesus way. The Jesus way, as we see over and over again in the Gospels, is that he treated sinners with at least respect and dignity, because they too bear the Imago Dei. So, as the Imago Dei, we all have purpose and value, all of us. Number 3, as the Imago Dei, we celebrate diversity. We celebrate diversity. In verse 27, it says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them." The Imago Dei includes diversity. Now, in the beginning, there was only one category of diversity, gender. Male and female. They complemented each other. They're supposed to work well together. And as civilization grew, more and more categories started to develop, right? Especially race or culture, ethnicity. Genesis 11 speaks of the Tower of Babel. We don't have time to get into that, but emerged multiple different languages. And I think that's a good thing in general. As bearers of the Imago Dei, we continue to embrace the various categories of diversity. During PhD studies, I had a couple friends that would commute because we had classes basically 2 days of the week. So I had a buddy from Chicago commute. He stayed in my apartment. Another guy from just across the border in New York State, Western New York, who would come and he would sleep over as well. And the three of us couldn't be different from a physical standpoint. We had a guy who was from Chicago and he was black. And another guy who was Texan, and a redheaded Texan, makes him more of an anomaly, I guess, as he would joke around, who was white. And then you had a guy from California who was Asian. 3 guys who couldn't be any more different from each other, different backgrounds, different cultures that we come from. And we all met in Canada, of all places. But we love the diversity of our friendship. The nights when we're winding down, we're all done with our studies, and we're just hanging out in the living room or on the balcony or something, the 3 of us, and we just have these chats. The thing that united us was Christ and our love for studying Scripture. And we'd have amazing conversations, and we'd bring out perspectives that the other 2 may not have had because we had different backgrounds, different experiences in life. And it was great. And every year when we get together in November for the annual theological conferences, we look forward to reuniting and just getting together. That diversity it's what God loves. There's even diversity within the triune Godhead. You don't have God the Father, and God the Father. No, you have God the Father, you have God the Son, and you have God the Spirit. They each have different roles in this world and do different things in this world, and they work together, and they're unified as one God in 3 persons. But even the Godhead is diverse. I am so proud to be a pastor of a church that is so diverse. I just want to say it. I mean, from the moment I walked in, I looked around, and I saw the diversity run forth. And it's a diversity that doesn't really point out the diversity. It's just, we're all human. We have people from various backgrounds. Maybe come from different countries. And so, there's a lot more I can say about this. But as bearers of the Imago Dei, as the Imago Dei, we celebrate diversity. And I want to encourage those of us who are in our own little bubbles to venture outside of our comfort zones. We're not doing that already. And there are some of us, as we talk about diversity, and I have a lot of white friends who get it. They understand and they get it. And I know there's a lot of discussion here, and there's just one more point that I want to add before we go to our conclusion. It's this: there's such a thing as white guilt. There are white people who feel guilty about what has happened throughout history regarding racial injustices. And I would say that doesn't have to be a thing. White guilt does not have to be a thing, because if you yourself have not participated in these injustices, you yourself do not have to feel guilt. It's about the individual. We're talking about categories, we're talking about groups of people, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be a thing. I've heard some white people say that they're ashamed to be white now, which 50 years ago, you think, whoa. Doesn't have to be a thing. We all should be proud regardless of what our background is. You see, racism is always going to be an issue. As long as sin exists in this world, racism at certain levels is going to exist. I hate to say that, but that's the reality of it. But the current crisis is not just racism. I've been a victim of racist comments. I've been told that I look like so and so just because they're Asian, or I've been told hurtful things because of my race. But it hurts. It's fine. It's just out of ignorance. But my life is not on the line. the current crisis is not simply racism, but it's racial injustice. When people die or even get physically hurt because of their race. That is the problem. And in 1 John 4:12 it says, "No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us." In other words, if we cannot love the image of God, whom we can see, how can we love God, whom we cannot see? We can't. There is a hope that we have in Jesus Christ. Christianity is not a religion of hate, it is not a religion of judgment, it is a religion of love and sacrifice that Jesus gave. And that is the hope that we have in the midst of this chaos that we live in. That the love of Jesus covers all of our sins, even the sins of racism and racial injustice. Jesus Christ is the one who can change a hardened heart. Jesus Christ is the one that unites, not divides. So at this time, as we transition to communion, we focus on the source of our faith, Jesus Christ, and we focus on the hope we have in this world in Jesus Christ.